The mining station orbiting Kepler 442b had seen better days. Its hull bore the scars of countless asteroid impacts, and the life support systems wheezed like an old man climbing stairs. But what truly made the place unbearable wasn't the failing machinery or the cramped quarters. It was the smell. Commander Sarah, Chen stepped off the transport shuttle and immediately regretted not bringing a stronger respirator. The stench hit her like a physical wall, a nauseating mixture of sulfur, rotting vegetation, and something that reminded her of a zoo that hadn't been cleaned in decades. The welcoming committee of 3 aliens stood before her, each trying their best to breathe through their mouths. "Commander Chen," wheezed Zixtal, a blue-skinned Meridian whose gills were fluttering rapidly in distress.
"Thank the void you're here."
"We've been waiting for a human supervisor for months." Sarah raised an eyebrow. The Galactic Mining Consortium rarely sent humans to oversee operations. Most species considered them too emotional and unpredictable for management positions. "What exactly is the situation here?" The second alien, a crystalline being called Veltar, chimed like breaking glass when he spoke. "It's Craxon, Commander. Well, you'll see." They led her through corridors that seemed to pulse with the overwhelming odor. Sarah had worked with dozens of alien species during her 15 years in space mining, but this was beyond anything she'd experienced. Workers they passed looked miserable, their various alien features contorted in expressions of disgust that transcended species barriers. "How long has this been going on?" Sarah asked, pulling out her tablet to review the personnel files. 3,000 years, Zixtal replied matter-of-factly. Sarah stopped walking. "I'm sorry, did you say 3,000 years?" "Give or take a century," Veltar added helpfully. "The records aren't entirely clear." They reached the main mining bay where the sound of heavy machinery mixed with what could only be described as contented humming. Sarah peered around the corner and saw him. Craxon was massive, even by draconian standards. His white scales, which should have gleamed like polished marble, were instead coated in what appeared to be several millennia worth of grime, mining dust, and substances Sarah preferred not to identify. The dragon-like alien stood nearly 12 feet tall, with 4 powerful arms that ended in claws capable of tearing through solid rock. His long tail swept back and forth as he worked, leaving trails in the accumulated filth on the floor. "Sweet, merciful stars," Sarah breathed. The draconian's head turned toward them, revealing intelligent golden eyes set in a face that might have been majestic if it weren't for the layers of crud. When he smiled, his teeth were the only clean things visible on his entire body. "Ah, the new supervisor," Craxon rumbled in a voice like distant thunder. "Welcome to Mining Station Xerxes 7. I'm Craxon, Senior Excavation Specialist." He gestured grandly with one massive arm, sending small clouds of dust and debris floating through the recycled air. Sarah fought the urge to gag. "Craxon, I'm Commander Chen. I need to speak with you about—" She paused, unsure how to diplomatically address the situation. "About my work performance?" Craxon beamed proudly. "I maintain the highest extraction rates in this sector. My efficiency ratings have been perfect for the last 800 years. "No, it's not about your work performance," Sarah began carefully. "It's about personal hygiene." Craxon's expression shifted to confusion. "Hygiene?" Zixtal stepped forward, his gills now completely sealed against the air. "Craxon, my friend, when was the last time you bathed?" The massive draconian scratched his head, sending a small avalanche of debris to the floor. "Bathed? I believe it was— Let me think. Ah, yes, it was when I first arrived at the station. The previous supervisor insisted on a clean workspace." He chuckled, a sound like rocks tumbling down a mountain. "Silly rule, really. All that water was just going to wash away eventually." Sarah felt a headache coming on. That was 3,000 years ago. Has it been that long? Craxon seemed genuinely surprised. "Time flies when you're doing work you love." She looked at the mining reports on her tablet. Craxon's numbers were indeed impressive. He consistently outperformed every other worker on the station by margins that should have been impossible. His technical knowledge was encyclopedic, and his safety record was spotless. If not for the smell, he would have been the perfect employee. "Craxon," Sarah said, trying to find the right words. "Your work is excellent, but the odor is affecting the entire station. The other workers are getting sick. Productivity in other departments is down 40%, and the air filtration system is operating at maximum capacity just to keep everyone breathing. The dragon looked genuinely distressed. I had no idea. But Commander, washing seems so unnecessary. My scales are naturally antimicrobial, and the accumulated materials actually improve my grip when handling equipment. Sarah watched as several other workers in the bay began making hasty exits. One unfortunate maintenance robot actually short-circuited when it got too close to Craxon, sparks flying from its olfactory sensors. I understand your perspective, Sarah said, her diplomatic training kicking in, but we need to find a solution that works for everyone. Craxon's tail drooped slightly. Are you ordering me to bathe, Commander? There was something in his tone that made Sarah pause. Despite his impressive size and obvious strength, there was a vulnerability in his golden eyes. She realized that this wasn't defiance. It was genuine confusion about social norms that he'd apparently never learned. Not ordering, Sarah said gently, but I am asking for your help in solving a problem that's affecting the entire crew. Would you be willing to work with me on this? The massive draconian considered this for a long moment, his claws tapping against his leg as he thought. Finally, he nodded slowly. Very well, Commander Chen, if my condition is truly causing problems for my colleagues, then I suppose we must address it. Though I confess I'm not entirely sure how to proceed. It has been rather a long time. Sarah smiled for the first time since arriving at the station. Don't worry, Craxon. We'll figure it out together. After all, that's what humans do best. Find solutions to impossible problems. 3 days into what the crew had started calling Operation Deep Clean, Sarah realized she had vastly underestimated the challenge. The cargo bay now looked like a disaster zone. Industrial pumps worked constantly to remove the contaminated water, while specialized containment units stored the various substances that had been scraped, dissolved, or blasted off Craxon's hide. Commander, reported Zixtal through the intercom, the science team wants to catalog some of these deposits. They're finding mineral samples that don't appear in any database. Sarah paused in her work with the ultrasonic cleaner. Unknown minerals? Craxon has apparently been a walking geological museum. Veltar's voice crackled through the speakers. Some of these formations are from asteroid systems that were destroyed centuries ago. Craxon, who was currently submerged up to his chest in a custom-built cleaning tank, looked embarrassed. I may have been somewhat thorough in my sample collection over the years. The dragon's transformation was already remarkable. The sections they had cleaned revealed scales that seemed to glow with an inner light, each one perfectly formed and gleaming like polished alabaster. But the contrast between clean and dirty areas made him look like a living patchwork quilt. Craxon, Sarah said, adjusting the settings on the pressure washer. Tell me about your homeworld. What was it like? Draconia Prime was a harsh place, he replied, settling deeper into the tank as Sarah worked on his back ridges. Volcanic activity kept the air thick with ash, and the mining clans competed for the deepest and most dangerous excavations. Cleanliness was seen as evidence that you weren't working hard enough. Sarah nodded, understanding beginning to dawn. So when you came to work off-world, staying dirty was a way of proving your worth? Precisely. But I begin to see that different environments require different adaptations. Craxon lifted one of his arms from the water, examining the clean scales with wonder. I had not realized how much the accumulation was affecting my sensory perception. I can feel temperature differences more clearly now, and my scales seem more flexible. The cleaning process had revealed other issues as well. Some areas of Craxon's hide showed signs of minor skin conditions that had gone untreated for centuries. Dr. Helix had developed a specialized treatment plan, but she had to deliver her recommendations through the intercom system. The smell was still too overwhelming for her to enter the cleaning bay. Commander Chen, Craxon said suddenly, may I ask you something? Of course. Why are you doing this personally? You could have assigned the task to maintenance staff or hired external contractors. Sarah considered the question while working on a particularly stubborn deposit that appeared to be fossilized algae. Because leadership isn't about giving orders from a distance. Sometimes it's about rolling up your sleeves and doing the work that needs doing, especially when it's difficult or unpleasant. Is this a human characteristic? It can be. Humans have a saying, lead by example. We believe that if you're not willing to do something yourself, you shouldn't ask others to do it. Craxon was quiet for several minutes processing this information. On Draconia, leaders typically prove their worth through displays of strength or knowledge. The concept of service-based leadership is unfamiliar to me. Different species, different approaches, Sarah said, switching to a chemical solvent for a section that seemed to be more mineral than organic. But they can all be effective in the right circumstances. As the days progressed, other crew members began volunteering to help. Tormund contributed engineering expertise designing more efficient cleaning systems. The science team provided analysis of different substances, helping them develop targeted removal strategies. Even some of the junior staff began taking shifts, though they had to work in full environmental suits. "This is unprecedented," observed Counselor Nixara during one of their daily briefings. "I've never seen a crew unite around such an unusual challenge." Sarah looked through the observation window at Craxon, who was currently being scrubbed by a team of maintenance robots while he calmly read technical manuals. Maybe that's what we needed. A problem that required everyone to work together. On the 5th day, they encountered their biggest obstacle yet. A section of Craxon's chest appeared to be covered with what looked like metallic armor, but closer inspection revealed it to be a massive accumulation of rare metals that had bonded with his scales through some unknown process. "This is going to require specialized equipment," Sarah said, examining the deposit with a scanner. "Some of these metals are worth more than the entire station." "Remove them," Craxon said without hesitation. "But Craxon, this represents decades of valuable accumulation. Commander, you have taught me that some things are more valuable than rare metals. The comfort and health of my colleagues, for instance." The dragon's golden eyes were serious. "Besides, I believe I will be more effective at my job when I am not carrying the weight of 3 millennia on my back." The removal process required cutting tools, chemical baths, and techniques more suited to archaeological excavation than personal hygiene. But as each layer came away, Craxon seemed to grow lighter, not just physically but emotionally. "I had forgotten," he said quietly as Sarah worked on his neck ridges, "what it felt like to move freely. I had adapted to the weight and restriction so gradually that I didn't realize how much it was limiting me." "Sometimes we adapt to things that aren't good for us," Sarah replied. "It takes an outside perspective to help us see that change is possible." By the end of the 6th day, they had cleaned roughly half of Craxon's massive form. The transformation was stunning. The clean sections revealed a being of remarkable beauty, with scales that seemed to catch and reflect light in ways that made him appear almost ethereal. But more importantly, the air quality in the cleaning bay had improved dramatically. The industrial ventilation systems were finally keeping pace with the odor, and Sarah found herself able to work without her full respirator for short periods. "Commander," Craxon said as she prepared to leave for the night, "I wanted to thank you, not just for the cleaning, but for helping me understand something important about community and consideration for others." Sarah smiled. "We're not done yet, but you're right. This is about more than just hygiene. It's about learning to be part of something bigger than ourselves." "Indeed. And, Commander, I have been thinking about what you said regarding human leadership. I believe I would like to learn more about these concepts. Perhaps when this process is complete, you might teach me." "I'd be honored to, Craxon. After all, good leadership is about helping others grow, regardless of their species." The next morning, Sarah stood in the station's main conference room, surrounded by what looked like a war council. Representatives from every department had gathered, each wearing the strongest filtration masks available. The room's air purifiers worked overtime, creating a constant hum that almost drowned out their conversation. "The situation is critical, Commander," reported Dr. Helix, the station's Altarian medical officer. Her usually pristine blue fur was dulled with stress. "We've had 17 cases of respiratory distress this week alone. The Zephyrians can't even enter sections of the station anymore. Their sensitive nasal cavities simply shut down in self-defense." Chief Engineer Tormund, a stocky dwarvish humanoid, slammed his wrench on the table. "The air recycling systems are at breaking point. We're burning through filters faster than we can replace them, and the contamination is spreading to the food replicators. Half the crew is surviving on emergency rations." Sarah nodded grimly. She'd spent most of the night researching draconian physiology and culture. What she'd learned was both fascinating and troubling. Draconians were indeed naturally antimicrobial, with scales that could resist most forms of bacteria and fungus. In their natural habitat, they rarely needed to clean themselves, relying instead on periodic molting to refresh their skin. What about the psychological impact? asked Counselor Nixara, a telepathic being whose mental shields were probably working overtime just to function near Kraxon. The crew's morale is at an all-time low, Sarah admitted. But here's what I don't understand. Kraxon has been here for 3,000 years. How did previous supervisors handle this? Zixtal shifted uncomfortably. They didn't. Most alien supervisors lasted a few months before requesting transfers. The smell was more manageable back then. More manageable. It builds up over time, Veltar explained. Like geological sediment. What started as merely unpleasant has become... He gestured helplessly. Sarah pulled up Kraxon's personnel file on the main screen. His work history was remarkable. Perfect safety record, consistently high productivity, innovative solutions to complex mining problems. He had personally discovered 3 new mineral deposits and developed extraction techniques that were now used throughout the consortium. He's irreplaceable, she said finally. His knowledge of the asteroid belt's geological formations is unmatched. If we lose him, we lose the most productive mining operation in this sector. The room fell silent except for the laboring air purifiers. So what do you propose? Dr. Helix asked. Sarah took a deep breath through her mask. We help him. Not just with bathing, but with understanding why it matters. Humans have dealt with hygiene challenges before. This is just on a bigger scale. An hour later, Sarah found herself in the station's largest cargo bay, which had been hastily converted into what she hoped would become Kraxon's personal cleaning facility. She'd requisitioned industrial-grade scrubbers, high-pressure water jets, and enough soap to clean a battleship. Kraxon stood in the center of the space, looking like a statue that had been buried for millennia and recently excavated. He examined the equipment with obvious curiosity but also apprehension. Commander, I must confess something, he rumbled. I have been researching human customs since our conversation yesterday. I understand that cleanliness is important to your species, but I fear I may have forgotten how to properly clean myself. Sarah felt an unexpected pang of sympathy. Here was a being who had lived for millennia, brilliant enough to master complex mining operations, yet genuinely confused by something most species took for granted. That's okay, Kraxon. We'll take it slow. First, can you tell me why you stopped bathing in the first place? The massive draconian was quiet for a long moment. In my youth, on my homeworld, cleanliness was associated with weakness. Warriors and miners were expected to bear the marks of their labor. When I first came to work for off-world companies, the constant demand for bathing felt like denial of my heritage. Sarah nodded. Cultural differences had destroyed more interspecies relationships than wars. But you're not on your homeworld anymore. Here your heritage includes being part of this crew, and right now that crew is suffering. Kraxon's golden eyes met hers. You speak wisely. But Commander, I must warn you, the task ahead may be more challenging than you realize. 3 millennia of accumulated material will not be easily removed. As if to emphasize his point, a small piece of what looked like mineralized grime fell from his shoulder and struck the floor with an audible thunk. Sarah activated the first water jet, adjusting it to a gentle spray. Let's start small. Just wet down one section and see what happens. The water hit Kraxon's left arm and the effect was immediate and dramatic. Decades of dirt began to slough off in sheets, revealing patches of scale that gleamed like fresh snow. But it also released a concentrated wave of odor that made Sarah stagger backward. Fascinating, Kraxon observed, apparently immune to the smell. I had forgotten my scales were this color. Sarah activated the ventilation systems and tried again, this time adding soap to the mix. The industrial detergent foamed into a gray-brown lather that looked like it could be classified as a hazardous material. Kraxon, I need you to help me understand something. Your work is incredible. You care deeply about doing it well. Why doesn't that same care extend to personal maintenance? The dragon considered this while Sarah worked on his arm with a rotating brush. On Draconia, we are taught that the mind and the task are what matter. The body is merely a tool. To focus on its appearance seemed frivolous. But what about the comfort of others? Kraxon's expression grew thoughtful. You're suggesting that personal hygiene is not about vanity, but about community consideration. Exactly. In human culture, we have a saying, your right to swing your fist ends where my nose begins. Sometimes taking care of ourselves is really about taking care of others. As the first layer of grime washed away, Sarah began to see the true scope of the challenge. What she'd initially thought was simply dirt was actually a complex ecosystem of mineral deposits, organic matter, and substances that defied easy classification. Some sections had hardened into a shell-like coating that would require specialized tools to remove. "Commander," Craxon said quietly, "I am beginning to understand why the others avoid me. I had attributed it to species differences, but now I see that I have been inconsiderate." Sarah paused in her scrubbing. "Craxon, you're not a bad person. You just learned different rules growing up. The important thing is that you're willing to change." "Change?" the dragon repeated slowly. "Yes, I suppose even mountains must change eventually." The water running off Craxon's arm was finally starting to run clearer. Sarah estimated they had cleaned perhaps 1 square foot of his total surface area, and it had taken 2 hours. "This is going to take a while," she said, stepping back to survey their progress. Craxon looked down at his partially cleaned arm, flexing the gleaming scales experimentally. "Commander Chen, I have a request. When we are finished with this process, I would like to see my reflection. I suspect I have forgotten what I truly look like." The final phase of Craxon's cleaning took place 3 weeks later in front of the largest gathering of interspecies dignitaries the station had ever hosted. Representatives from the Galactic Science Council, the Mining Consortium Board, and even the Interspecies Medical Coalition had arrived to witness what was being called the most significant xenobiological discovery of the century. Sarah stood before the assembled crowd in the main conference hall, feeling the weight of dozens of alien gazes upon her. Behind her, a massive display showed real-time footage of the cleaning bay, where Craxon was undergoing the removal of the final accumulated layers from his head and neck. "Ladies, gentlemen, and beings of all classifications," Sarah began, "what we've accomplished here over the past month represents more than just an exercise in personal hygiene. It's been a testament to the power of cooperation, understanding, and mutual respect." Director Volnath leaned forward in his seat. "Commander Chen, while we appreciate the philosophical implications, could you speak to the practical discoveries? Our preliminary analysis suggests applications that could revolutionize multiple fields of science." "Of course," Sarah replied, activating her presentation. "Working with Craxon as a full research partner, we've identified 17 previously unknown bacterial strains, 43 rare mineral formations, and what appears to be biological evidence of cosmic phenomena that we've only theorized about until now." The display showed detailed analysis results, each more remarkable than the last. One bacterial colony had developed the ability to neutralize radioactive isotopes. Another could break down plastic polymers at the molecular level. The mineral deposits included samples from asteroids that had been destroyed in supernovas, preserved in the unique environment of Craxon's bioaccumulation. "But perhaps most significantly," Sarah continued, "we've demonstrated that the most valuable discoveries often come not from exploitation, but from collaboration and mutual respect." Dr. Helix stood from her seat. "Commander, what is Craxon's current status? The bio readings we're receiving are quite remarkable." Through the display, they could see Craxon in the final stages of cleaning. The ultrasonic systems were working on the delicate area around his head, removing centuries of accumulation with surgical precision. As each layer came away, the true magnificence of his draconian features was revealed. "Why don't we ask him directly?" Sarah suggested, opening the communication channel. Craxon's voice filled the conference hall, clearer and more resonant than anyone had ever heard it. "Greetings, distinguished colleagues. I am honored to address this assembly, though I confess it feels strange to do so without my usual aromatic presence." A ripple of laughter passed through the crowd the first time many of these beings had found anything about Craxon's condition amusing rather than distressing. "Craxon," called out Dr. Korth, "how are you feeling as this process nears completion?" "Physically, I feel as though I have shed not just dirt and grime, but the weight of millennia. My mobility is improved, my sensory perception is enhanced, and I believe my cognitive function may even be clearer." Craxon paused thoughtfully. "But more importantly, I feel reconnected to my community in a way I had forgotten was possible." The crowd watched in fascination as the final cleaning robots completed their work on Craxon's magnificent horned crest. As the last of the accumulated material was washed away, there was an audible gasp from the assembled beings. Craxon was beautiful. His scales gleamed like fresh snow touched by starlight, each one perfectly formed and almost luminescent. The elegant curves of his draconian features spoke of nobility and ancient wisdom. His golden eyes seemed to hold depths that hadn't been visible before, and when he smiled, his presence commanded respect rather than revulsion. "Magnificent," breathed the Centaurian ambassador. "I had no idea that such beauty was hidden beneath 3,000 years of neglect," Craxon finished gently. "Yes, it has been quite a revelation for all of us." Sarah activated the viewing portal, allowing the crowd to see Craxon directly rather than through monitors. As he emerged from the cleaning chamber, moving with a grace that had been impossible under his previous burden, the assembled beings rose to their feet in spontaneous applause. "Now," Sarah said, "Craxon has a proposal for the scientific community." Craxon stepped forward, his massive form somehow conveying both power and humility. "Distinguished colleagues, I offer myself as a willing research partner in studying the materials that have been recovered from my body. However, I propose that we approach this collaboration with specific principles in mind." He activated his own presentation display, showing a detailed research framework that he had developed with Sarah's help. "First, all research will be conducted with full transparency and my active participation as a scientific collaborator, not merely a source of samples. My 3 millennia of observational data regarding the environments where these materials were acquired must be considered integral to any meaningful study." The assembled scientists exchanged excited glances. The historical and environmental context Craxon could provide would be invaluable. "Second, any practical applications derived from this research must be made freely available to worlds and species in need, particularly those facing environmental or medical crises that these discoveries might address. And third," Craxon continued, his voice taking on a note of gentle authority, "I propose the establishment of new standards for interspecies workplace hygiene and health, to ensure that no other being suffers unnecessarily from neglect of basic care, whether due to cultural misunderstanding or simple oversight." Director Volnath stood. "Craxon, your proposals are both generous and wise. The consortium board will formally approve them within the week. But I must ask, why are you willing to share these discoveries so freely? The commercial value alone could make you wealthy beyond imagination." Craxon's golden eyes found Sarah in the crowd. "A wise human once taught me that true leadership is about service to others. I have spent 3,000 years focused solely on my own work and my own comfort. Perhaps it is time I contributed to something larger than myself." The applause that followed was thunderous, coming from beings who had traveled from across the galaxy to witness this moment. As the formal presentations concluded and the crowd began to disperse, Sarah found herself alone with Craxon in the cleaning bay. He stood before a massive mirror that had been installed for this moment, the first time he had seen his reflection in 3 millennia. "How do you feel?" Sarah asked softly. Craxon studied his reflection for a long moment, turning his head to examine himself from different angles. "I feel like myself again, or perhaps like someone I never knew I could become." He looked at Sarah. "Commander, I cannot adequately express my gratitude. You have given me more than cleanliness. You have given me back my dignity and my sense of purpose. You did the hard work, Craxon. I just provided some encouragement and industrial-strength soap." They stood together in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the late shift workers pass by the observation windows. Several stopped to wave at Craxon, who waved back with obvious pleasure. "Commander," Craxon said eventually, "I have one final request. Anything. I would like to learn more about human leadership principles. If you would be willing to teach me, I believe I might have something to contribute to station management." Sarah smiled. "I think that's an excellent idea. After all, someone who can inspire an entire galactic scientific community probably has leadership potential." Craxon chuckled, the sound now clear and musical rather than muffled by centuries of grime. "Indeed, though I suspect my first administrative policy will be mandatory shower schedules for all crew members." "That," Sarah said, "sounds like the beginning of a beautiful administrative career." 6 months after the completion of Operation Deep Clean, Mining Station Xerxes 7 had become the most requested assignment in the Galactic Mining Consortium. The transformation went far beyond Craxon's remarkable metamorphosis. The entire station had evolved into a model of interspecies cooperation and innovation. Sarah stood in her office, reviewing the monthly reports with a sense of satisfaction she had never experienced in her 15-year career. Productivity was up 40% across all departments. Worker satisfaction ratings had reached historic highs. Most remarkably, the station had become a center for breakthrough scientific research that was already helping worlds across the galaxy. "Commander," came Craxon's voice through the intercom, "the morning briefing is ready to begin." Sarah smiled as she made her way to the conference room. Craxon's voice had become one of the most welcome sounds on the station, clear, confident, and carrying an authority that came from genuine respect rather than fear. The conference room was packed with department heads, visiting researchers, and administrative staff. At the head of the table sat Craxon, resplendent in a specially designed uniform that accommodated his magnificent draconian form while projecting professional authority. His scales seemed to glow with health and vitality, and his presence commanded attention in ways that had nothing to do with odor. "Good morning, everyone," Craxon began, his voice carrying easily through the room. "I'm pleased to report that our collaborative research projects continue to exceed expectations." He activated the main display, showing a galaxy-wide map dotted with green indicators. "The bacterial strain we designated as XD247 has now been successfully deployed on 14 worlds, struggling with radioactive contamination. Initial results suggest a 70% reduction in environmental radiation levels within the first 6 months of treatment." Dr. Helix, who now worked closely with Craxon on biological research, added, "The polymer-digesting bacteria have been even more successful. We've cleaned up 3 entire ocean systems and reduced plastic waste on 27 industrial worlds." Sarah watched with pride as Craxon guided the meeting with skill that would have impressed corporate executives across the galaxy. His transformation from isolated worker to collaborative leader had been as dramatic as his physical cleaning. "What about the new hygiene protocols?" asked Tormund, who had become one of Craxon's strongest supporters. "Excellent question," Craxon replied. "The mandatory health and cleanliness standards we implemented have reduced sick days by 60% and improved overall crew morale significantly. More importantly, we've had 0 incidents of hygiene-related workplace conflicts." Counselor Nixora raised her hand. "Craxon, could you speak to the psychological impact of these changes? The crew's mental health indicators are the best I've seen in decades." Craxon's expression grew thoughtful. "I believe that when individuals feel cared for and respected, they naturally extend that care and respect to others. The hygiene protocols aren't just about cleanliness. They're about establishing a culture where everyone's comfort and well-being matters." After the meeting, Sarah found herself walking with Craxon through the station's corridors. The transformation was visible everywhere. Cleaner facilities, happier workers, and an atmosphere of collaborative purpose that was almost tangible. "You've become quite the leader," Sarah observed. "I had an excellent teacher," Craxon replied, "though I must admit I never expected to find leadership so fulfilling. For 3,000 years I focused solely on my own tasks. Now I find myself thinking about how to help others achieve their potential." They paused at an observation deck that offered a spectacular view of the asteroid field. The mining operations continued at their usual efficient pace, but now they were guided by principles of sustainability and worker welfare that had become the standard throughout the consortium. "Craxon, I have something to tell you," Sarah said. "I've been offered a promotion to regional director. It would mean leaving Xerxes 7. Craxon's golden eyes showed surprise, then understanding. "Congratulations, Commander. It's a well-deserved recognition of your accomplishments here. The thing is, they've asked me to recommend my replacement as station commander." Sarah smiled. "I told them I had the perfect candidate in mind." "Commander Chen, surely you don't mean, who better than someone who understands both the technical challenges of mining operations and the importance of creating a workplace where every being feels valued and respected?" Craxon was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the stars. "Commander, I am honored by your confidence. But I must ask, do you truly believe that a former Malodorous recluse can effectively lead a diverse crew of interspecies workers? Craxon, you've already been doing it for months. The crew doesn't follow you because they have to. They follow you because they want to. Because you've shown them that leadership means caring about others' well-being, not just giving orders." "What about the consortium board? Will they accept a draconian commander?" Sarah chuckled. After the scientific breakthroughs and productivity improvements you've generated, they'd probably make you a board member if you asked. That evening, the station held an impromptu celebration in the main recreation hall. Word had spread about Craxon's promotion, and beings from every department had gathered to show their support. The contrast with the situation 6 months earlier was stark. Instead of avoiding Craxon, the crew was actively seeking him out, eager to congratulate their new commander. Speech. Speech, called out Zixtal, whose gills were now functioning perfectly in Craxon's presence. Craxon stood, his massive form commanding attention without effort. My friends, he began, 6 months ago, I was isolated not just by accumulated filth, but by my own misunderstanding of what it means to be part of a community. The room fell silent, everyone listening intently. Commander Chen taught me that true strength comes not from individual achievement, but from lifting others up. That cleanliness is not about vanity, but about respect for those around us, and that leadership is not about commanding from above, but about serving those who depend on you. He looked around the room, making eye contact with beings from a dozen different species. I promise you that as your commander, I will never forget these lessons. Every decision I make will be guided by a simple question: how can I help my crew achieve their best? The applause was deafening, but Sarah noticed something else. There were tears in many eyes, regardless of species. Craxon had accomplished something remarkable. He had created a genuine sense of family among beings who had little in common beyond their work. Later that night, Sarah and Craxon stood together in the cleaning facility that had become a permanent installation on the station. The space now served the entire crew, and its use had become a point of pride rather than merely a necessity. Commander, or should I say, former Commander Chen, Craxon said with a smile, I have one final confession to make. What's that? I actually enjoy being clean now. I find myself looking forward to my daily hygiene routine. It's become a time for reflection and preparation for the day ahead. Sarah laughed. That might be the most human thing you've ever said. Perhaps that's because I've learned that the best qualities aren't limited to any single species. Compassion, dedication, the desire to help others, these are universal traits that we can all cultivate. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the night shift workers go about their duties with the quiet efficiency that had become the station's hallmark. Craxon, Sarah said finally, I'm proud to have been your friend and colleague. This place, these people, you're going to take care of them, aren't you? Craxon's golden eyes gleamed with determination. Commander Chen, I give you my word. This crew will always have a leader who remembers what it means to be cared for by others, and who understands that sometimes the most important thing a leader can do is simply help someone clean up their life. Sarah smiled, knowing that she was leaving Xerxes 7 in the best possible hands, or claws as the case might be. Sometimes the most unlikely people made the best leaders, especially when they had learned their lessons the hard way. As she prepared to leave for her new assignment, Sarah reflected on the remarkable truth that had emerged from their months-long cleaning operation. Beneath every layer of accumulated neglect and misunderstanding, there was always the potential for something beautiful to emerge. It just took patience, compassion, and occasionally, industrial-strength soap. The filthy albino alien dragon who had gone 3,000 years without a wash had become Commander Craxon, leader of the most successful mining station in the galaxy. And it had all started with a human boss who believed that everyone deserved a chance to be clean, respected, and valued. Sometimes, Sarah thought, the best leadership lessons came from the most unexpected teachers. 2 weeks into the cleaning operation, mining station Xerxes 7 had become something unprecedented in Galactic Mining Consortium history, a tourist destination. Word had spread through the corporate network about the human commander, who was personally cleaning a 3,000-year-old dragon, and curious executives, scientists, and even journalists had begun arriving to witness the spectacle. Sarah stood in the observation deck, watching a delegation of consortium board members peer through the reinforced windows at Craxon, who was currently undergoing treatment for a section of his back that appeared to be hosting its own miniature ecosystem. Remarkable, breathed Director Volnath, a distinguished Centaurian whose usual composure was cracked by obvious fascination. The biological implications alone are staggering. Some of those bacterial colonies could represent entirely new life forms. The mineral deposits are equally significant, added Chief Geologist Krickstall. We're seeing formations that suggest Kraxon has been exposed to cosmic phenomena that most beings never encounter. Sarah felt a mixture of pride and protectiveness. He's not a research specimen. He's a valued member of our crew who deserves respect and dignity. Of course, Commander, Director Volnath said quickly. We meant no disrespect, but surely you understand the scientific significance of what you're uncovering. Through the window, they could see Kraxon patiently submitting to the ministrations of a team of xenobiologists who were carefully cataloging each discovery. His cleaned areas now covered roughly 70% of his body, revealing a being of breathtaking beauty. His white scales seemed to possess an inner luminescence, and the elegant curves of his draconian features spoke of a nobility that had been hidden for millennia. Commander Chen, came Kraxon's voice through the intercom. Might I speak with you privately? Sarah excused herself from the delegation and entered the cleaning bay. The smell was now manageable, still present but no longer overwhelming. Kraxon was sitting in his custom cleaning tank looking uncharacteristically thoughtful. What's on your mind? Sarah asked, pulling up a chair beside the tank. I have been observing the reactions of our visitors, Kraxon said slowly. They look at me with fascination but also with a certain distance, as if I were an artifact to be studied rather than a person to be known. Sarah nodded. I've noticed that too. How does it make you feel? Conflicted, Kraxon admitted. Part of me is pleased that my condition is being recognized as scientifically significant. But another part feels exposed, vulnerable in a way I have not experienced before. That's understandable. You've spent 3,000 years hidden under layers of accumulation. Now you're being seen, really seen for the first time in centuries. Kraxon lifted one massive hand from the water, studying the gleaming scales. Commander, I have been thinking about identity. For so long I defined myself by my work, my efficiency, my knowledge of mining operations. But I realize now that I had also been defined by my condition. Some part of me had begun to believe that the filth was who I was. And now I am discovering that I am someone else entirely, someone I had forgotten existed. He looked at Sarah with those remarkable golden eyes. It is both liberating and terrifying. Sarah reached out and placed her hand on one of his clean scales. The texture was surprisingly warm and smooth, like polished stone that had been sitting in sunlight. Change is scary, even when it's positive. But you're not going through this alone. Indeed. And that, Commander, is perhaps the most significant discovery of all. I had forgotten what it meant to be part of a community that cared about my well-being. Their conversation was interrupted by Zixtal's excited voice over the intercom. Commander, you need to see this. We've made an incredible discovery. Sarah followed the directions to Laboratory 7, where she found the science team clustered around a series of analysis displays. Dr. Helix was practically vibrating with excitement, her blue fur standing on end. Commander, we've been analyzing the mineral samples from Kraxon's dorsal ridge, and we found something extraordinary, Dr. Helix announced. Some of these formations contain traces of elements that shouldn't exist in this galaxy. What do you mean? Feltar chimed in, his crystalline form resonating with excitement. The isotopic signatures suggest that Kraxon has been exposed to materials from outside our local galactic cluster, possibly from his travels to the most remote mining sites, or perhaps from cosmic events that we've never documented. There's more, added the head xenobiologist, Dr. Korth. The bacterial colonies we've discovered have developed unique metabolic pathways that could revolutionize biotechnology. Some of them appear to process heavy metals in ways that could have applications for environmental cleanup. Sarah felt a growing sense of unease. You're talking about Kraxon like he's a mine to be stripped. Oh no, Commander, Dr. Helix said quickly. We would never suggest anything harmful, but the potential for beneficial research is enormous. With Kraxon's cooperation, we could make discoveries that benefit countless worlds. Have you discussed this with him? The scientists exchanged glances. We thought perhaps you might broach the subject, Dr. Korth said carefully. Sarah returned to the cleaning bay, where she found Kraxon had been listening to the conversation through the station's communication system. His expression was unreadable. You heard? She asked. I did. And I find myself once again facing questions of identity and purpose. Kraxon settled deeper into his tank. Am I Kraxon the mining engineer or Kraxon the walking research opportunity? Sarah sat down beside him again. You're whoever you choose to be. The discoveries on your body are part of your history, but they don't define your future. The research could help others, Craxon mused. Worlds struggling with environmental contamination, species facing medical challenges they cannot solve alone. It could, but only if you want to participate, and only on terms that respect your autonomy and dignity. Craxon was quiet for a long time, the only sound the gentle humming of the cleaning equipment. Finally he spoke. Commander Chen, in human culture, when someone makes a significant sacrifice for the greater good, how are they honored? There are many ways, sometimes with monuments or ceremonies, but the most meaningful honor is usually when their sacrifice leads to genuine positive change, and when their contribution is remembered and appreciated. I see. Craxon nodded slowly. Then I believe I have a proposal to make to our scientific colleagues, but I will need your help to present it properly. Of course. What did you have in mind? I am willing to participate in their research, but with conditions. First, I wish to be treated as a collaborator, not a subject. I have 3,000 years of observational data about the environments where these materials were acquired, information that could be invaluable to their studies. Sarah smiled. That's an excellent point. You're probably the most experienced deep space geologist alive. Second, I want any discoveries made from materials found on my body to be shared freely with worlds that need them, particularly those struggling with environmental or medical crises. And third, Craxon's golden eyes gleamed with something that might have been mischief. I want a proper bathing facility installed on this station, not just for me, but for any crew member who might need it. And I want regular hygiene to become part of standard operating procedures. Sarah laughed, the first genuine laugh she'd had in weeks. Craxon, I think you're going to make an excellent leader yourself someday.